My husband didn't love me, and he loved our child even less. The day our son was born, he didn't even spare him a glance before coldly tossing him into my arms. Later, his first love, the woman who broke his heart, returned to the country. For the first time, this notoriously cold man got completely wasted. With a rare, warm smile, he pulled our son into a tight embrace. My son, surprised and thrilled, wrapped his tiny arms around the man's neck. Then he turned to me and whispered, "Mom, what's wrong with Uncle?" Yes. Because my husband didn't love our son, he never allowed him to call him Dad. For 7 years, our son could only call him Uncle. I knelt down, pulling my boy into my arms, my eyes burning with tears. Uncle's favorite person came back, so we shouldn't keep bothering him. We're going to move out, sweetie. After tucking my son into bed, I went to the guest bedroom, opened my laptop, and started drafting a divorce agreement. This year was the 7th anniversary of my marriage to Ethan Vance. It was also the 7th year we had slept in separate rooms. Now I was finally ready to let him go. Knock, knock. The door creaked open, and my 7-year-old son, Leo, walked in clutching a model airplane. "Mom, are we really leaving?" He looked up at me, his eyes filled with reluctance. "But Daddy hugged me tonight. Does that mean he's finally starting to like me?" I froze, my mind drifting back in a daze. In our 7 years of marriage, Ethan had never allowed Leo to call him Dad. When Leo was 2, Ethan took him to the supermarket. On the way back, they ran into an acquaintance. Because Leo accidentally babbled the word Daddy, Ethan immediately set the toddler down on the sidewalk and walked ahead, forcing the barely walking boy to follow him all the way home. By the time they reached the house, Leo had fallen countless times. His knees and palms were completely scraped and bleeding. When Leo was 4, he begged for months until Ethan finally agreed to take him to an amusement park. But again, because Leo let slip a careless Daddy, Ethan let go of his small hand. He left a 4-year-old child to get lost in the massive crowd. By the time I found him, Leo was hiding inside a thorny bush, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe from the lack of oxygen. Since then, Leo learned to call him Ethan. And our family became a complete joke. The memory made my throat tight. I couldn't help but pull my son into a tight hug. "Leo, the person Ethan loves is back. We can't stay in this house anymore." Leo's eyes dimmed. But then he quickly lifted the model airplane, holding it out to me. "But Mom, Daddy gave me this gift tonight. If he doesn't like me, why would he buy me a toy?" His voice was so desperate, so eager to prove that he was a child loved by his father. My mouth opened, but no words came out. How could I tell him? What was I supposed to say? Should I tell him that Ethan was only happy because his ex-fiancée was coming back? Or should I tell him that this toy was just a leftover piece of affection meant for another woman? I couldn't say it. I could only swallow the bitterness in my throat. Just like before, I chose to paint a beautiful lie to protect my child's fragile heart. I kissed Leo's forehead, secretly wiping away the tear that slipped down my cheek. This was a mother's instinct, to protect her child's dreams, even when her own heart was shattering. Suppressing a sob, I forced a smile. "Leo, if Mom wants to take you far away from Daddy, would you come with me?" My son's body went rigid. He whispered, "Do we have to go?" I still haven't called him Dad in front of everyone. My tears finally spilled over. I bit my lip hard. "Leo, Ethan, he doesn't want us in his house anymore. Let Mom take you away, okay?" Leo pulled his hand back, hugging the model airplane tightly to his chest. After a long silence, he spoke. "I want to give Uncle 3 more chances. If he really doesn't like us, we will leave him forever." Closing my eyes, I agreed to my son's request. "Okay. Ethan Vance, my son and I will give you 3 more chances. After that, there will never be a place for you in our lives again." It was Friday, the day Ethan's first love, Evelyn Ward, returned to the country. They were college sweethearts and had gotten engaged right after graduation. But just a month before their wedding, Evelyn fell head over heels for a French man she met at an art gallery. She abandoned Ethan without a second thought, flying to France to pursue her true love. And just like that, they parted ways. Ethan was devastated and fell into a deep depression for a long time. It was during that dark period that I became his executive assistant. One night, after too many drinks, we ended up in bed. I got pregnant. I became his secret wife, and because of that, both I and my child were deeply resented by him. After printing out the divorce agreement I had drafted yesterday, I started writing my resignation letter. Unlike my son, I was used to Ethan's coldness. I was no longer foolish enough to wait for a heartless man to suddenly change his mind. 7 years was more than enough to crush all my fairy tale illusions. "Chloe, are you really resigning?" My coworker, Sarah, glanced at my screen and whispered in shock. I smiled faintly, using the excuse I had prepared beforehand. "My husband is working abroad. I'm planning to take Leo and join him. It's time for our family to be together." Sarah nodded understandingly. "That makes sense. It's been so hard on you raising a kid alone here. To be honest, we all secretly thought you were a single mom." Hearing that, I couldn't help but chuckle. But the laugh was bitter. I wasn't a single mom. Yet my life was worse than one. My eyes started to sting, but I quickly put on my practiced, professional smile, refusing to let anyone see my pain. Right after I submitted my resignation, Ethan walked into the office, accompanied by Evelyn. The woman walked ahead, a sweet, elegant smile on her face. Ethan followed closely behind her, his eyes locked onto her. Unable to look away for even a second, Sarah nudged me, whispering, "Chloe, look at that. Our cold boss is finally showing some emotion. The Ice King has melted." I forced a tight smile, though a storm was raging in my chest. Even the coldest winter eventually turns to spring. But for Ethan, even if I waited a lifetime, I would never get him to look at me that way. As they walked past my desk, I couldn't stop myself from calling out, "Eth." Just as the first syllable left my lips, Ethan shot me a freezing glare. "Miss Carter, is there something you need?" His tone was detached and carried a sharp warning. He was warning me to shut my mouth, warning me to remember my place as a mere assistant. I lowered my eyes, using every ounce of strength to hold back my tears. "My apologies, Mr. Vance." Ethan gave a curt nod and immediately turned his attention back to Evelyn, as if she were his entire world. He was my husband, the father of my child. Yet, right in front of me, he made no effort to hide his deep devotion to another woman. It was humiliating, but it was also a wake-up call. I laughed at myself. Originally, I wanted to tell him in person that I was resigning. Now it seemed there was no need. After all, he never cared. He didn't care about my feelings, he didn't care about our son. And he certainly didn't care about this marriage, which existed only on paper. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed. It was a FaceTime call from my son's smartwatch. "Mom, there's a parent-teacher conference tonight, so we're getting dismissed early. Marcus is driving me to your office now." I blinked, instinctively getting up to walk to the lobby. But as I stepped out, I saw Ethan gently reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind Evelyn's ear. And not far from them stood my son, carrying his heavy backpack. The tiny boy stood by the elevator doors, staring blankly as his father tenderly interacted with a strange woman. That gentleness, that patience. Neither I nor my son had ever received it. Just as I was about to rush over and pull Leo away, Ethan noticed him. Ethan's body went stiff, and he quickly pulled his hand back. But in the next second, he shielded Evelyn and walked right past Leo with steady, cold steps. He acted as if he didn't even know his own son. My heart ached fiercely. I rushed over, grabbed Leo's hand, and led him back to my desk. Before I could even think of an explanation, Leo's eyes filled with tears. He looked up at me. "Mom, is that the woman Uncle Ethan loves?" At that moment, I lost all strength to speak. I could only nod through my tears. Leo didn't ask anything else. He quietly sat down and pulled out his homework to write. But his tears kept falling, soaking the paper. I held him tight. He was my entire world. "Ethan, you have 2 chances left before we walk away." After packing my things, Leo and I headed home. On the way, Leo asked me quietly, "Mom, can Uncle come to the parent-teacher conference tonight?" In 7 years, Ethan had never attended a single school event for Leo. Looking at my son's hopeful eyes, I didn't have the heart to refuse. I pulled out my phone and sent Ethan a Snapchat message. "Leo has a parent-teacher conference tonight. Are you free?" The message was sent. And just like always, it was met with silence. Leo lowered his head, clutching his backpack. "He's not coming, is he?" Then he forced a mature, understanding smile. "It's okay. He is a busy CEO. I understand." Hearing his polite, too mature words, I felt as if a heavy boulder was crushing my chest. The pain made it hard to breathe. Just as I was about to comfort him, my phone buzzed. It was a reply from Ethan. "I'm free. I'll be there." A surge of joy rushed through me. I instantly shoved the phone in front of Leo's face. "Leo, look. Your dad said he's coming." Leo gasped and a brilliant, radiant smile lit up his face. This was the first time in 7 years that Ethan had agreed to show up for him. With Ethan's promise, Leo was ecstatic the entire way home. He chirped happily, telling me how many times the teacher had praised him this semester, how many straight A's he got, and how many certificates he had won. He even told me he had been elected class president, and the teacher was going to officially announce it tonight. At that, Leo looked up at me eagerly. "Mom, once Uncle knows how good I am at school, he'll like me more, right?" I froze, my heart aching even more. I silently prayed that Ethan wouldn't break his promise. Before we left this place, I wanted my son to have his wish fulfilled, even if it was just a temporary illusion. The clock ticked away, and the time for the meeting drew closer. But Ethan still hadn't shown up. Meanwhile, Evelyn's Instagram updated. In the photo, Ethan was sitting next to a young boy, patiently teaching him how to build a Lego set. The caption read, "The perfect future dad." I turned my head to look at the living room. My 7-year-old son was sitting quietly on the carpet, playing with his toys. It was the exact same Lego set, with a boy of the exact same age who also needed his father's company. But Leo had never had Ethan by his side. Sensing my gaze, Leo seemed to realize something. He asked cautiously, "Mom, is Ethan busy again?" I stared into my son's innocent eyes, unable to bring myself to tell him the truth. "Your father isn't busy. He's just busy being a dad to another woman's child." I couldn't say it. I could only pull him into my arms and whisper, "It's okay, baby. You have Mom. Mom will always be with you." Leo didn't ask further, but his eyes turned red. On the way to school, we both tacitly avoided mentioning Ethan's name. It was as if he had never promised to come, and as if our family had always consisted of just the two of us. "Ethan, you have one last chance." After parking the car, I walked into the school holding Leo's hand. But the moment we stepped into the classroom, I froze. "Uncle? Dad?" Ethan was sitting by the window. Hearing our voices, he looked up, his eyes widening in shock. "What are you guys doing here?" His genuine surprise made my heart sink. A terrible dread washed over me. Leo had been at this school for 6 months, but Ethan didn't even know which grade or classroom he was in. Leo, however, didn't notice the coldness. He ran over excitedly. "Dad, you." Ethan frowned. "What did you just call me?" Leo's smile instantly vanished. He quickly corrected himself, a practiced numbness on his face. "Uncle Ethan, you're sitting in the wrong seat. My desk is in the front row." He still looked at Ethan with hope. This was the first time Ethan had ever come to his school. He thought Ethan had kept his promise to him. But before his excitement could last, Ethan looked away, avoiding his gaze. "I'm not in the wrong seat. This is where I'm supposed to sit." Leo was stunned. Before he could speak, a small figure rushed over and shoved Leo aside. "Get away from him. He's my dad." Out of pure motherly instinct, I rushed forward and pulled Leo into my arms. Ethan stood up quickly, but when his eyes met Evelyn's surprised gaze, he froze. Pulling his hands back, he shielded the other boy, Toby, behind him and said stiffly, "Toby didn't mean it. I apologize on his behalf." Both Leo and I were stunned. That kind of protection, that kind of care. Leo had never received a single ounce of it. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan looked at me, a brief flash of guilt crossing his eyes. "A friend's kid." "Is that so?" I murmured, though my heart already knew the truth. This was the boy from Evelyn's Instagram post. The boy Ethan was willing to spend his precious time with. Sure enough, Evelyn walked in holding a bottle of water. She gasped when she saw us. "Chloe, you're here for the school open house too? Where's your husband? Why isn't he with you?" Hearing her question, I instinctively looked at Ethan. He quickly shifted his gaze, refusing to make eye contact. I understood. He was terrified I would expose our marriage in front of Evelyn. In a daze, my mind drifted back to the night Evelyn returned. That night, the cold, emotionless billionaire got drunk for the first time. And for the first time, when Leo called him daddy, Ethan had smiled. Leo and I thought we were finally going to have a happy family. But in the next second, Ethan mumbled Evelyn's name in his sleep. He had only hugged Leo because he mistook him for someone else. My grip on Leo's hand tightened. Just as I was about to speak, Leo beat me to it. "My dad is working in another country. He's very busy, and I don't want to bother him." His words left both Ethan and Evelyn speechless. I looked down in disbelief, only to see Leo's eyes pooling with tears. He looked at Ethan and forced a polite, distant smile. "We should go, sir. Have a good night." An overwhelming sadness blocked my chest. As we turned to leave, Ethan suddenly reached out and grabbed my wrist. "What did Leo just say?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling as if he was trying to confirm what he just heard. Was he shocked because the child who used to cling to him desperately was now actively pushing him away? I pulled my hand back, feeling nothing but cold irony. "Nothing, Mr. Vance. The meeting is about to start." I broke free from his grip and led Leo to our seats in the front row. Even after sitting down, I could feel his burning gaze on our backs. But no matter how intense that gaze was, it could never warm a heart that had already turned to ice. The classroom lights hummed softly as the parent-teacher conference began. The teacher, Mrs. Gable, stood at the podium with a bright, proud smile. "Before we review the individual term reports, I'd like to highlight a very special student. This term, one child achieved straight A's across every single subject, earned 3 district science fair trophies, and was unanimously elected class president." Ethan sat 2 rows behind us, sitting beside Evelyn. When he heard class president, he instinctively sat up a little straighter. His eyes flicked to Toby, who was slouching in his chair, playing with a handheld gaming console. "Toby, pay attention," Evelyn whispered, nudging her son. "Mrs. Gable might be talking about you." Mrs. Gable smiled warmth toward our row. "Leo Vance, please step forward to receive your honor scholar pin." A quiet rustle went through the classroom. Leo stood up. His small shoulders were straight, his posture perfect. Wearing his crisp school uniform, he walked up to the podium, his face calm, composed, and devoid of the childish nervousness he usually showed around Ethan. Leo's mother, Mrs. Vance, please join him, Mrs. Gable called out warmly. I stood up and walked to the front. As I pinned the gold star onto Leo's lapel, the parents in the room applauded. Mrs. Gable looked around the room, her eyes hovering over the back rows. Is Leo's father here tonight? We'd love to have him join the photo. The classroom fell quiet. Ethan's body went rigid. For the first time in 7 years, a surge of raw, instinctive pride welled up in his chest. He looked at the golden pin on Leo's chest, then looked at Mrs. Gable. His fingers tightened against his knees, and he began to push himself up from his chair. He opened his mouth, ready to step forward. Before he could stand up, Leo looked directly at the teacher and spoke in a clear, polite voice that echoed off the walls. My dad is working abroad in Europe, Leo said, his tone light and conversational. He's a very important man and works very hard, so he couldn't be here today. But my mom is here, and she is more than enough. Ethan froze mid-rise. The words hit him like a physical blow. His hand remained suspended in the air. His knees bent, caught in a bizarre, awkward half-crouch. The parents near him glanced back, confused. Evelyn pulled at Ethan's sleeve, frowning. Ethan, what are you doing? Sit down, people are looking. Ethan slowly sank back into his seat. His face was gray. He stared at the back of Leo's head as the boy stood on stage, receiving his certificate, smiling brightly at the camera beside me. Leo didn't look at Ethan once. Not when he accepted the paper. Not when the applause ended. Not even when we walked back to our seats. Ethan sat in Toby's row, surrounded by the scent of Evelyn's expensive perfume, feeling a cold, hollow emptiness open up inside his ribs, a void he couldn't explain and one he couldn't close. By the time the conference ended, a heavy autumn rain had begun to fall outside. The night air was crisp and chilly. Water poured off the eaves of the school entrance, splashing against the concrete steps where parents and children gathered under umbrellas. Marcus, our faithful driver, was waiting by our car with an umbrella. But as Leo and I walked down the steps, Ethan hurried out behind us, catching up to us near the glass doors. Chloe, Ethan called out, his voice thick with a strange, frantic tension. I stopped and turned around. Is there something else, Mr. Vance? Ethan flinched at the formal title. He looked down at Leo, reaching into his coat pocket as if searching for something to say. Leo, congratulations on becoming class president, Ethan said, his voice raspy. I didn't know you were doing so well at school. Leo looked up at him. His small face was entirely calm. Thank you, sir. Mrs. Gable is a good teacher. Sir. Ethan's throat bobbed hard. Why do you keep calling me that? Before Leo could answer, Evelyn's shrill voice cut through the air from behind them. Ethan. Toby lost his umbrella. Evelyn ran over, holding a weeping Toby by the hand. He's getting shivering cold. The car is parked across the street. Can you carry him over? Ethan looked at Evelyn, then looked back at Leo. The streetlights reflected off the deep puddles outside. The rain was coming down harder now, whistling through the trees. There was only one large umbrella in Ethan's hand. Leo watched his father. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He simply stood there, waiting quietly to see what Ethan would do. The third chance. Ethan looked at Toby's tear-streaked face, then at Evelyn's anxious expression. He swallowed hard, his eyes shifting back to us. Chloe, wait here under the roof, Ethan said quickly, handing the large umbrella to Evelyn as he scooped Toby into his arms. I'll drop them off at the car first, then I'll come back to drive you and Leo home. Without waiting for a response, Ethan ran out into the pouring rain, holding Toby close to his chest, shielding the boy from the wind with his own coat. Evelyn walked beside him under the umbrella, their silhouettes disappearing into the dark, rainy street. I looked down at Leo. The boy stood on the dry concrete step, watching his father run through the storm to protect another woman's child from a few drops of water. Slowly, Leo reached into his backpack. He pulled out the plastic model airplane, the toy Ethan had brought home on the night Evelyn returned. The toy Leo had clutched to his chest like a sacred treasure for 3 days. Leo stepped to the edge of the stairs. He opened his small hands and dropped the airplane straight into the muddy, rushing gutter beside the steps. The plastic toy splashed into the murky water, swirling once, twice before being swept away down the storm drain, disappearing into the dark. Leo wiped his hands on his pants, turned around, and looked up at me with a soft, beautiful smile. Mom, Leo said softly, his voice completely calm. 3 chances are over. Let's go home. Okay, I whispered, holding his small, warm hand in mine. Let's go home. We stepped under Marcus's umbrella, got into our car, and drove away into the night, leaving the school, the rain, and Ethan Vance behind forever. The next morning, Ethan woke up at 7 a.m. in his spacious master bedroom. The house was deathly quiet. Usually by this time, the scent of fresh coffee, toasted bread, and warm porridge would drift up from the kitchen. Chloe would be quietly ironing his shirts in the laundry room, and Leo would be sitting on the living room rug, quietly reading his books so as not to wake him. Ethan rubbed his temples, feeling a strange, persistent headache. Last night, after dropping Evelyn and Toby off at their hotel, he had driven back to the school to pick up Chloe and Leo. But the steps were empty. The parking lot was dark. When he got home at midnight, the house was dark, and the guest room door was locked. He had assumed Chloe was just tired, and went to sleep early. He put on his silk robe and walked downstairs. The kitchen was spotless. Cold. The coffee maker was unlit. The dining table was bare, except for a single white envelope sitting right in the center of the dark mahogany wood. Ethan frowned. "Chloe," he called out, his voice echoing loudly off the high ceilings. No answer. He walked over to the table and picked up the envelope. Inside were 2 documents. First, a formal, signed divorce agreement, executed by the city's top family law firm. All marital property was waived by Chloe. She asked for nothing except full custody of Leo and her personal premarital savings. Second, a formal resignation letter from her position as executive assistant at Vance Corporation, effective immediately. Ethan's heart gave a sudden, violent thud against his ribs. "What is this?" he muttered, a nervous, bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Is she playing games again?" He threw the papers onto the table and marched up the stairs to the guest bedroom. He grabbed the handle and twisted it. Unlocked. He pushed the door open. The room was completely empty. The bed was stripped bare to the plain mattress. The closet doors swung wide open, revealing bare hangers. Leo's toys, his books, his clothes, everything was gone. Even the small framed photo of Chloe and Leo that sat on the nightstand had been removed. It didn't look like a room someone had left in a hurry after an argument. It looked like a room that had been erased. Panic, sharp and icy, finally sliced through the haze of Ethan's arrogance. He pulled out his phone and dialed Chloe's number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He called Leo's smartwatch line. "The subscriber has disconnected this service." Ethan stood in the center of the sterile, empty room, his phone pressed to his ear, listening to the hollow automated tone. "She's bluffing," Ethan said out loud to the empty walls, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his phone. "She has no family, no independent income, and a 7-year-old child. Where else can she go? She'll be back in 3 days." He turned on his heel, walked out of the room, and drove straight to the office. When Ethan arrived at Vance Corporation at 8:30 a.m., he expected to see Chloe sitting at the executive assistant desk outside his office, preparing his daily schedule. Instead, the desk was completely cleared out. Her computer monitor was dark. Her personal mug was gone. My coworker, Sarah, was standing by the filing cabinet, organizing files into cardboard boxes. "Where is Chloe?" Ethan demanded, his voice sharp, laced with an irritation he couldn't quite mask. Sarah stopped what she was doing. She looked at Ethan, her expression devoid of its usual professional warmth, replaced by a cold, quiet pity that made Ethan's skin crawl. "Miss Carter submitted her final resignation 3 days ago, Mr. Vance," Sarah said flatly. "Her handover was completed yesterday afternoon." "Resignation?" Ethan barked, his face darkening. "I didn't approve it." "She didn't need your approval," Sarah replied, handing him an official HR exit document. "She exercised her contractual right to resign with 30 days accrued leave. Her employment with Vance Corp is legally terminated." Ethan snatched the paper, his eyes scanning the lines furiously. "Where did she go? Did she leave an address?" "She told the department she was moving abroad to join her husband," Sarah said, looking Ethan straight in the eye. "She said her family was finally going to be together." Ethan froze. Her husband? Moving abroad? What kind of nonsense is that? Ethan yelled, his voice echoing through the open office floor where several employees turned to stare. "I am her husband." Sarah let out a short, dry laugh, a sound full of quiet mockery. "Are you Mr. Vance?" Sarah asked softly. "Because for 3 years, every time Leo came to this office, he called you Mr. Vance or Uncle Ethan. For 7 years, Chloe ate her lunch alone at that desk while you flew across the country 4 business trips. We all thought she was a single mother." "Shut up," Ethan roared, slamming his palm against the doorframe. "You don't know anything about my family." "You're right," Sarah said, turning her back on him to pick up a stack of folders. "None of us do. Because you never had one." Ethan stumbled back a step. He turned around and slammed his office door shut, locking himself inside. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, the desk where Chloe had brought him hot tea every single afternoon for 7 years, and pulled out his personal phone. He called Evelyn. "Ethan?" Evelyn's sweet voice answered on the second ring. "Are you free today? Toby wants to go to the zoo." "Evelyn," Ethan interrupted, his voice hoarse, ragged, and trembling. Where were you 5 years ago when you were in France? Evelyn paused on the other end of the line. What? Why are you asking about that? Now. Ethan had spent the last 2 hours having his private investigator look into Evelyn's life abroad, something he had refused to do for 5 years because he wanted to preserve his romantic, tragic fantasy of their lost love. The investigator's report had landed in his inbox 20 minutes ago. Evelyn hadn't gone to France to pursue art. She had gone to follow a wealthy French heir who had abandoned her after 2 years when he found out she was embezzling his family's money. Toby wasn't a child born of a grand romance. He was the result of an illegitimate affair with a married gallery owner who had paid Evelyn a lump sum to stay out of the country. She hadn't returned to Ethan because she missed her first love. She had returned because her money ran out, her credit was ruined in Europe, and she knew Ethan Vance was a rich, lonely fool who still pined over a college memory. Ethan, what's wrong with you? Evelyn's voice turned defensive, losing its sweet, delicate tone. Are you listening to rumors? Don't call me again, Evelyn, Ethan whispered, his eyes hollow as he looked at the empty desk through his office window. Don't ever come near my company again. He hung up the phone and threw it against the wall. The screen shattered into 100 webbed cracks, echoing in the quiet, sterile room. 6 months passed. The city of Northgate moved on, as cities always do. Vance Corporation remained one of the top enterprises in the state, but its CEO, Ethan Vance, had become an unrecognizably hollow shell of a man. He didn't go to galas. He didn't attend social dinners. He stopped drinking, stopped meeting old college friends, and spent every evening sitting alone in his massive, empty mansion, staring at the clean mahogany table where a white envelope had once sat. He had hired 3 private detective agencies to track Chloe down, but Chloe had erased her digital footprint with terrifying, surgical precision. Her bank accounts were transferred abroad, her social media was deleted, and her degree credentials were verified through an international clearinghouse in London. She had vanished as if she had never existed in his life at all, until an autumn afternoon in November. Ethan was attending the International Architectural Design Expo in the neighboring coastal metropolis of Riverport. As the keynote presentation ended in the Grand Convention Hall, the main projector screen displayed the winners of the Global Sustainable Urban Design Award. First place, Vance Carter International Design Group. Lead director, Chloe Carter. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The screen flashed a high-definition photograph of the winning team standing on stage at the ceremony in Geneva 2 weeks ago. Standing in the center was Chloe. She wore an ivory-white tailored silk suit, her long dark hair styled in elegant waves, a brilliant, confident smile lighting up her face. She looked radiant, powerful, breathtakingly beautiful, a woman who owned her world entirely, unburdened by the past. Standing beside her, holding a small silver trophy, was 9-year-old Leo. The boy was dressed in a sharp navy suit, looking tall, handsome, and glowing with health and happiness. And standing on Chloe's left, with his arm placed comfortably and protectively behind her waist, was Marcus, the family's former senior logistics director, a distinguished, handsome man who had quietly resigned from Vance Corp the exact same week Chloe left. Ethan stared at the screen, his chest heaving as if he had been punched by an iron fist. He didn't wait for his assistants. He didn't care about the corporate meetings scheduled for the evening. He threw his leather coat on, ran out of the convention center, and boarded the first flight to Geneva. 2 days later, the autumn sky over Geneva was clear, crisp, and a brilliant shade of indigo blue. Outside the glass entrance of the International Palais des Nations, a formal press reception had just wrapped up. Chloe walked down the wide marble steps, carrying a leather briefcase, laughing softly as she listened to Leo recite a French poem he had learned at his new school. Your accent is getting much better, Leo, Chloe smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Marcus said if I score 100 on my French history exam, we can go sailing on the lake this weekend. Leo chirped, his eyes shining with pure joy. Deal, a warm, deep voice answered. Marcus stepped down the stairs carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate, handing one to Leo and wrapping a soft cashmere scarf around Chloe's neck. The wind near the harbor gets chilly in the afternoon. Chloe looked up at Marcus, her eyes filled with a quiet, peaceful warmth that needed no words. Chloe, a raspy, desperate scream tore through the quiet afternoon air. Chloe stopped in her tracks. Standing at the bottom of the marble steps, guarded by 2 conference security officers, was Ethan. He looked unrecognizably ruined. His eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark, hollow circles. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his hands trembling violently as he broke past the security guards, scrambling up the marble steps toward us. Chloe! Leo! Ethan cried out, his voice cracking into a ragged, pathetic sob. Marcus instantly stepped in front of Chloe and Leo, his broad shoulders forming an impenetrable wall. Mr. Vance, you are trespassing on private diplomatic grounds. Step back. Get out of my way, Ethan screamed, his eyes wild as he stared past Marcus at the woman and child standing behind him. Chloe, please, look at me. It's Ethan. Chloe stood quietly behind Marcus. Her face was completely serene. No shock, no anger, no hatred. Just an absolute, impenetrable void. Chloe. Ethan fell to his knees right there on the cold marble steps, tears streaming down his hollowed cheeks, clutching at his chest as if he were dying. I was wrong. I was blind. I kicked Evelyn out. I sold the penthouse. I bought the house by the lake you always wanted. I built a playground for Leo. Please, come home. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. He looked at Leo, his voice dropping into an agonizing, broken whisper. Leo, my boy, look at Daddy. Daddy bought you the big Lego set you wanted, the one with the space station. Look at me, Leo. Please call me Dad just once, please. The surrounding international diplomats and reporters stopped, whispering in hushed tones as they watched the prominent American CEO weeping like a pathetic beggar on the steps. Leo stepped out from behind Marcus. He looked down at the man kneeling before him. He remembered the scraped knees on the sidewalk when he was 2. He remembered the thorny bush in the crowd when he was 4. He remembered the rain outside the school, and the model airplane washing away down the muddy gutter. Leo didn't hide. He didn't flinch. He looked straight into Ethan's bloodshot eyes, his expression completely calm, mature, and untroubled. Mr. Vance, Leo spoke, his voice clear, steady, and light as the mountain breeze. Ethan's heart leaped with a frantic, desperate hope. Lao? My dad works in Europe, Leo said, his voice echoing across the silent marble. Blessa. He takes me sailing on weekends. He helps me with my science projects. He holds my hand when we cross the street. And he loves my mom more than anything in the world. Leo reached up and took Marcus's hand, holding it securely in his small palm. He looked back down at Ethan, his eyes clear as glass. You aren't my dad, Mr. Vance, Leo said softly. You're just a stranger who used to live in our house. Boom. It felt as though the entire sky had collapsed onto Ethan's chest. He slumped forward, his forehead slamming against the freezing marble step. A choked, blood-curdling sob tearing from his throat, echoing across the grand plaza. Chloe walked past him. Her heels clicked softly against the stone, even light and perfectly steady. She didn't look down at the man sobbing in the dirt. She didn't pause. He didn't look back once. Let's go get dinner, Leo, Chloe said softly, pulling her son close to her side. Marcus booked that fondue place you wanted to try. Yay, Leo cheered, holding his mom's hand on one side and Marcus's hand on the other, walking down the steps toward the sunlit harbor. 3 years later, Northgate's business district remained as busy as ever, but Vance Corporation had long since faded from its former glory. After Ethan's emotional breakdown in Geneva, he neglected his corporate duties entirely. The company suffered major contract losses, its primary logistics division fractured, and within 18 months, it was acquired by an international conglomerate. Ethan retained his title as a minority shareholder, but he lived as a recluse in a quiet house near the northern lake, the house he had bought in a desperate, futile attempt to entice Chloe back. The house was massive, luxurious, and pitch black every night. Inside the living room, sitting on a glass table, was a brand new unopened space station Lego set, covered in a thick layer of dust. Every evening, Ethan would sit on the porch with a bottle of scotch, staring out at the dark water, listening to the quiet wind blowing through the pines. In his hands he held an old, worn photograph, a small picture taken 7 years ago at a supermarket, showing a 2-year-old boy reaching out his small arms, trying to grab his hand. A picture he had thrown into the trash back then, and dug out of the landfill. Years later, he clutched the faded paper against his heart, weeping quietly into the dark, until the stars faded into the dawn. In Geneva, the spring sun washed over a colorful villa overlooking Lake Leman. The yard was filled with blooming white lilies and lush green grass. 10-year-old Leo ran across the lawn, holding a remote control, flying a large, sleek drone through the bright blue sky, laughing joyfully as Marcus ran beside him, giving him flight instructions. Chloe sat on the porch, sipping fresh tea, reviewing her firm's upcoming architectural projects. Her face was healthy, radiant, and completely free of the cold bitterness that had once shadowed her youth. She looked at her son laughing under the open sky, then looked at the man walking over to hand her a fresh jacket as the breeze picked up. Is the wind too cold, Chloe? Marcus asked, wrapping his arms gently around her shoulders. Chloe leaned back against his chest, smiling as she looked up at the boundless, crystal clear blue horizon. No, Chloe whispered, holding his hand tightly in hers. The weather is perfect. The past was dead, and her world was finally, beautifully, undeniably whole.